Hi, pod people. I'm Stacy.
And I'm Heather.
Welcome to this episode of Why Do People Do That? Today we have Ian with us.
Hey, Ian.
Hi, guys.
You can introduce yourself.
My name is Ian Garfinkle. It's nice to meet you guys.
Ian is an ADHD executive function coach. And so today's episode is about ADHD. I guess more specifically, the why of ADHD. I think it's super helpful to help people who have ADHD, as well as the caretakers, parents, spouses, or educators of people who have ADHD to understand a little bit more about ADHD, why people with ADHD do, why we react the way that we do to people with ADHD, and hopefully help our listeners and our viewers to have a better understanding that can bring them into better awareness in life. So, that being said,
I want to start. My first question is explain to me, like I'm 5, what is executive function?
The executive function deficits that people with ADHD deal with. It would be anything from their time management, difficulty with organization, difficulty with planning. I do believe that it comes with different types of factors as well, so it's deeper than just the cognitive functions. You do have the societal implications where sometimes these children, teenagers, and adults can feel left out. And then you also have a spiritual aspect to it with these deficits where they can start to develop a certain level of just an inability to fit in surroundings. So I think all of those tied in together, in my opinion, wind up coalescing into what the entire deficit function would be.
so from the science of it, right, if we're going to talk about the brain, the executive functions live in the prefrontal cortex, right? And so what we're dealing with is working memory, organization, time management, cognitive flexibility, motivation, inhibitory control, and I'm missing one, emotional regulation.
Hmm.
So those are the executive functions. So when somebody has an executive function delay,
Right.
they are impaired in all of those things. And so maybe we could just sort of talk quickly about what that looks like for people when they have executive function delays in those things. Because I think one of the most important things, and one of the things I teach parents and educators and individuals with ADHD, and I know you do as well, is that it's not just these, skills that you need to have. You need to have these skills actually working cohesively together in order for us to function and do the things that we do. So the most perfect way I can explain it is right now we're teaching you about executive functions. And so we have said things like brain and science. We've said things like organization and time management, and we've used the word cognitive. So while we're talking to you and you're trying to learn this, you are harnessing in information that you already have. What's a brain? What's the word cognitive mean? Right? What's a lobe? What is time management? What is organization? And you're thinking about where this fits in your life. And you might even be thinking about where this fits into other people in your life who may have ADHD, right? Do they have time management issues? So anyway, working memory is helping you bring information that you already have into the present conversation, and that helps you learn. So this also requires for you to be able to pay attention, right? You have to pay attention to me and to Ian while we're talking so that you can use what you already know, pay attention to
Incorporate.
what we're saying to incorporate. At the same time, you might have an urge to say something. You might have an urge to say something because I'm talking a lot. I do that. I have a tendency to talk. I just keep going, right? So you might have an urge to say something, but you're using your impulse control, your inhibitory control to stop yourself from talking, to pay attention, and to listen at the same time. So we're using 3 different executive functions right now: working memory, attention and focus, right? And inhibitory control, just to listen to me so that what I'm saying to you can make sense.
So, like a person with ADHD would have difficulty not interrupting and not just like asking their question or just shooting that out.
right? I mean, one of the biggest symptoms of somebody with ADHD is the urge to interrupt.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. They get a thought in their head and it's just an impulsive reaction just to jurt it out
Hmm.
right away. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no thought process behind actually taking that step. It's 0 to 100 immediately as soon as the thought actually enters their head, and then it blurts out without thought. And it's difficult. It's hard to navigate conversations when you have it and you don't have that impulse control, because so often you wind up listening to your own thoughts rather than what the other person is saying. So
Absolutely.
you're already planning your next sentence rather than
Listening to,
exactly.
yep. Sorry, I interrupted.
So that's one of the hard things about having a conversation when you are I don't want to use the word dealing, but when you are going through the motions of struggling with ADHD. That's the hard part with the
Mm.
complex of it.
Yeah, I think what makes it hard also, your point is that other people don't really understand. And so when you're having a conversation with somebody who has ADD or ADHD and they are interrupting, you might think, well, they're being rude or they're being self
Hmm.
centered or self absorbed. Why are they interrupting me and not listening to what I have to say? And it can be frustrating for the person on the other end, right?
Mm.
My husband has ADHD. And when him and I have a conversation, he will do two things. He'll interrupt me sometimes to finish my sentence for me because he thinks he knows what I'm going to say and feels like he needs to just get to the point, cut to the chase, because it's hard for him to just sit and listen to me talk. And I do have a tendency to talk a lot, which is, I think, probably hard for him. And I think the other piece of it is he knows that if he does not blurt out what he's thinking, he's going to lose it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
And by the time I'm done with my rambling, he's frustrated because he doesn't remember what he was going to say. And what he was going to say was important. And so he does interrupt me. And I do get frustrated, but I try my best, you know. Mark, if you're watching, I'm really trying my best. I try my best to tolerate it, even though I want to finish my thought. And sometimes I will go, and he'll see me do that, and he'll be like, I can't help it. If I don't say it, I'm going to lose it.
Mm.
And that's a very real experience that people with ADHD have. One more example I want to give, and then we can move on just in terms of executive functions, because it is so important to understand executive functions. I think, number one, because most people don't understand that that's even a thing.
Right.
And that's really, I think, more of a recent thing,
Yeah.
because when my son was diagnosed when he was 7 and he's now 24, I never heard of executive functions. I didn't know they were a thing. It wasn't something that you could Google and read about.
Correct.
It wasn't something that the neurologists or the neuropsychologists were talking about. It was purely about the fact that he couldn't sit still and he couldn't pay attention.
Mm.
Now we know so much more that helps us understand so much more of what people like to call, ADHD behavior. And I quote it because it's not really behavior, but we'll get to that. So another example, I think that's a really good example, which is so important, is the cognitive flexibility piece
Yes.
of ADHD. And the best way I could explain it, because I think a lot of people can relate to this example, is you bring your kid to the park. Your kid has ADHD. You say to your child before you get to the park, your kid wants a snack, and you say, no, 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 no. We're not going to have a snack because whenever we go to the park, the ice cream man is always there, and you're going to want ice cream. So we're going to go to the park, we're going to play, and when the ice cream man gets there, we're going to get some ice cream. So I don't want you to eat now and then have ice cream because you're going to get a stomach ache or you won't be able to eat dinner, blah, blah, blah. Okay, kid's all excited. We're going to the park. You're sitting on the bench, you're watching your kid run around playing, and you realize an hour and a half has gone by and the ice cream man hasn't shown up. Crap. Like
Yep.
literally.
See, I think that's a parenting win. Like, there's no ice cream man.
Yeah, but when you have a kid who has ADHD and the executive function delay of cognitive flexibility, now here's what happens. You say to your kid, hey, little Johnny, it's time to wrap up. We got to get going. We got to go home, wash up, eat dinner. We still have homework to do, blah, blah, blah. And the kid's like, but you said the ice cream man was going to be there and we were going to get ice cream. Now, for the neurotypical 8-year-old, You could say, I know I said that, but the ice cream man didn't show up. And I'm really sorry. And that sucks. But, we're just not
We gotta
here. What are we
go.
going
We
to
can
do?
have
We
ice
got to
cream at
go.
home. Yep.
Yeah, we've got some, we've got a gallon of mint chocolate chip in the freezer. We'll just have some of that after dinner. And, any kid's going to be disappointed. Any adult, I mean, I would be disappointed. I'm 50 years old, and I would just be like,
I wanted soft serve.
I really wanted Mr. Softy. God damn it. Right. But I'm gonna say, all right, I'm gonna deal with the disappointment because I can regulate my emotion and I can shift my thinking and I can come up with, a whole new narrative. All right, I'm gonna have them in chocolate chip later. That's fine. Another time I'll get the Mr. Softy because I can think ahead. I have time management skills. I can think to the future. I can think about next time, right? I can shift my thought from I'm going to have ice cream now to I'm going to have ice cream later. Instead of having this kind of ice cream, I'm going to have that kind of ice cream. I can deal with my impulse and I can regulate the feelings I'm having about it, right? I'm having feelings about this, but I can manage that and I can move on. The kid with ADHD with the executive function delay cannot. He can't shift his thought, the cognitive flexibility. He can't shift his thought.
Away from
Away from
but
the
you
ice cream,
told me
yes.
that the ice
I
cream
was
man would be
getting
here.
here. I'm getting Mr. Softy at the park. You said, right? And now they also can't manage the feelings that are coming up. They're disappointed. And disappointment is hard, but when you're somebody with ADHD and you have the executive function delay of emotional regulation, you feel that feeling with more intensity. And it's not something we can quantify because they're feelings, right? They're abstract. But I can tell you just from science-backed research and observation of human beings over the course of time that people with ADHD feel their feelings with more intensity
Oh my God, yes.
than the average person, right? So the way that you might feel disappointment is going to be different than the way that I feel disappointment.
Correct.
It's bigger for you.
Yes.
It's more intense for you. And so now you've got this little 8-year-old kid who can't manage his feelings, who can't shift his thoughts, who can't think to the future and understand what next time is. Also, there's that working memory piece. Don't you remember last time this happened and then we ended up, eating the ice cream and having ice cream Sunday night and it was a lot of fun? No. Kid isn't remembering that. He's not harnessing that memory in and putting it in the present moment. He can't. Right? There's that working memory piece. There's the cognitive flexibility piece. There's the time management piece. And then there's the ability to organize. All right, let me organize. We're going to leave here. I'm going to go home. I'm going to wash up. I'm going to eat dinner. And then I'm going to have ice cream. You need to have the ability for time management and organization to be able to wrap your brain around that in and of itself. Right? So I'm going to let that go. I just want to make sure that our pod people at home and Heather understand really how powerful understanding executive functions are.
There's just to add on to that,
Yeah.
people with ADHD, and myself as a child included, we have a really hard time conceptualizing what could be. So the first day that I met Stacy, we laughed because she had said something that individuals with ADHD, their time is either now or not now.
Mhm.
So we cannot mentally see into the future and be able to come up with a plan and map out the reward that we're going to get because we're so hyper fixated on being in this exact present moment and not getting what we want in the moment. So there's like a large sense of almost hopelessness in the present and aimlessness in the future, which it again, like I said, it deters them from being able to conceptualize what could be if we actually went down the path of listening to our mother about going home, taking the shower, doing the homework, eating the dinner, having the Sunday night. We can't physically bring ourselves to be able to think like that. I don't want to use the word impossible. It's very difficult, especially when you don't have the components and the ability to regulate your emotions at such a young age without given the tools to do so.
So the parent at the park then of little 8-year-old Johnny, who's now throwing things and having an absolute fit because the ice cream man wasn't there and we have to go home. I mean, as a parent, how do you manage that? Because, without kind of the knowledge and understanding of that, it would be, we'll get in the car, let's go. And if you keep acting like this, you're not getting ice cream at all,
Yeah.
which is only going to kind of further the whole thing. So how do you deal with the kid in that moment?
So we're going to give you two answers. I'm going to give you an answer just from the perspective of the therapist who works with parents. And then I'd like Ian, if you're obliged to do so.
Yeah.
I'd like you to kind of chime in if you're comfortable with that, to talk about what it was like to be a kid
Oh yeah.
with ADHD whose parent did not handle it this way and
Yeah.
how it affected you. Because
Absolutely.
I think, a lot of, I like to kind of reference the peanut gallery. The peanut gallery is, the teachers, the grandparents, the neighbors, the educators who like to tell parents what they think they should be doing. And I received a lot of that, because my son has ADHD. And so when he was little and I was just trying to figure things out myself, a lot of people would say to me, he needs consequences. You need to show him that behavior is not acceptable.
We were all sorts of full of great parenting advice when none of us had children also. It's
Yes,
like, you really need to do this. It was like, what did we know?
exactly.
But,
And
but we were telling you what you should do. It was
I
great.
think, for the most part, I'd like to try to believe the peanut gallery means well,
Mhm. Absolutely.
but they don't know what they're talking about because they're not ADHD experts and they're not parenting experts. And even the parenting experts who don't know anything about ADHD have the wrong answer. Because you can't handle it the way that you would traditional parenting style,
hmm
right? Traditional parenting style is a whole other podcast because I have things to say about that too. But let's just stick with this, right? I mean, I had so many people coming at me telling me I had to discipline my kid, discipline, discipline, discipline. And
Consequences. And,
yeah.
Yep.
And the reality is, when your child cannot control, like you're talking about it being so hard, it almost feels impossible
Right.
to do certain things. So if your child is not able to do certain things, all of the rewards and stickers in the world are not going to make them be able to do it, right? Like, well, listen, stop having feelings about that and you'll get a sticker, right? If the child could control what they were experiencing and not have the meltdown, trust me, they wouldn't have the meltdown. A very, very amazing ADHD coach that I trained with a couple of years ago had said, children do well when they can. So if they're not doing well, it's not their choice. They don't want to be suffering and they don't want to torture you. That's not their goal. And they don't want to get in trouble. So if there's an issue that we're seeing, you want to go with the belief that it's probably real and let's deal with it. So when your child has that meltdown at the park because of the whole ice cream man situation, this is an actual beautiful opportunity to teach your child some executive function skills, right? And this is what Ian does. He's an executive function coach, which is so needed and such a lifesaver for people who have ADHD. Because what you can do as a parent or as a coach is you sit down in the moment with that kid. And what I would do, I would sit right down on the floor with them. I would get on their level
hmm
and I would very calmly say to them, "You're so disappointed. You're so disappointed. And that's okay." Because we have an opportunity here to teach the child emotional regulation. That feelings are hard, but that's okay. We can have the feeling. We can sit with the feeling. The feeling isn't going to destroy you because the problem is people start to learn with ADHD, other people can't tolerate how big my feelings are. And I have to hold them in and I have to hide them. And that's when they start to go into doing things that are maladaptive or self destructive. Drugs, addiction,
Self-harm.
self harm, acting out,
Mhm.
saying nobody gets me anyway. So F it. I might as well just be a bad kid. And that's when you start to see ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. They completely shut down and give up and start to act out. So if you can use this moment to teach your child, feelings are hard, but let's learn how to tolerate them. And I'm going to show you, my child, how to tolerate it by showing you that I can tolerate it. I can stay calm. I'm going to sit on the ground with you and I'm going to be like, sucks. The ice cream man is here. I wonder where he is today. I wonder where he could be. I wonder why he didn't come. You're disappointed. And that's okay. And just sit with the disappointment. Let your kid cry. That's what they're doing. Wait for them to calm down naturally by showing them that you can sit with them and be calm. And then start to offer new ideas and new thoughts because what you want to start to teach them is how to self soothe. And you want to start to teach them how to shift the narrative from this story. I'm going to get ice cream. I'm going to get Mr. Softy at the park. to maybe Mr. Softy has the flu.
Yep.
Maybe Mr. Softy, maybe there's a reason Mr. Softy isn't here. Maybe his car broke down. Isn't that sad? And I understand you're disappointed. So what can we do instead? Right. And you start to teach them how to do the cognitive shift. In therapy, we call that CBT, but you don't have to be a therapist to do CBT, believe it or not. Right? Executive function coaches can do CBT and parents can do CBT.
People themselves could just do CBT by literally reading a self-help book and learning how to do it.
Yeah. So it's really about teaching your child in that moment how to shift their thought, how to shift their belief, and also then giving them the organization. They have organization deficits and they have time blindness. They can't see into the future and understand later. So what you say to them is, this is what we're going to do right now. We're going to get up. Can you do that? Right? We break things down into parts. We're going to get up. I'm going to get up. Can you get up with me? Let's get up and see how that feels. Take a deep breath. We're going to walk to the car. Can we do that? Can we just walk to the car and see how that feels? Can we sit down in the car and take a deep breath? We're going to do that. Because when you say to your ADHD kid, all right, we're going to go home, we're going to wash up, we're going to eat dinner, blah, 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 you've lost them. And not only have you lost them, but now you've stressed them the fuck out. They're stressed out. And now they might start to act out because they're stressed out. And now you're telling them they have bad behavior, and you're telling them that, they're going to be punished, or they're going to have consequences, or they need to be disciplined for their bad behavior. And you're telling them, if you snap out of your bad behavior magically on your own, I'm going to give you a prize. Now maybe you're threatening them. Well, I'm not going to give you the ice cream, right? While they're in the middle of their meltdown about the fact that they didn't get the ice cream they thought they were getting. Now you're telling them, well, if you don't stop it,
You're
get
not
up
going
and
to
get
get
to
the
the
ice
car,
cream.
you're not going to get the ice cream at all. So now you're threatening to punish them for the emotional response and the stress response that they're having to everything changing in their life and not being able to handle it, right? They're not falling apart to punish you as their parent. They're falling apart because of it. And it's our job as the parents or the therapists or the executive function coach to teach them the skills that they need. So this is how we teach them the skill. We teach them that emotions are hard and sometimes we have to tolerate them, but they're not going to destroy them. We teach them how to self-soothe. We teach them how to shift their thought from one thought to the next thought. We teach them how to organize the rest of their night, right? So let's talk a little bit
Okay, let's talk.
about what it looks like when the parent does not handle it that way and what the repercussions are.
I think children naturally are a bit more self-aware than what most parents give their kids credit for, especially ones with ADHD, because they are so aware and familiar with how they're feeling. Like Stacey had said, we feel things on a much deeper level. So we're able to tap into our emotional support system, I think, deeper than what 90% of other people are. So, but the problem is using the ice cream scenario. When we're acting out, and this is my personal experience and dealing with some of the other children and even the adults that I've dealt with, you're acting out in the moment and you so badly want to stop acting out in the moment. So it's almost like having a good angel and that bad devil on your shoulder at the same time. And you're having this outer body experience of watching yourself go through these motions of breaking down and hyperventilating and screaming and crying. And now you're disappointing your parent, your mom, your dad. Simultaneously, you're disappointing yourself because you know how bad it feels to act this way. So now you feel like you can't make yourself proud, you can't make your parents proud, which only then worsens how you're feeling in that exact moment. It's a horrible like cataclysm of events that are taking place all at once. And then when, like Stacey had said, when we have that threat, because we don't want the threat at the end of the day. So my mom used to do the threats all the time, and she would back those threats up. So
They weren't empty threats.
They were not empty. I didn't get the ice cream at the end of the day. I had to go to sleep early. There was no TV. There was no, star or sticker or getting the prize that I worked all week for. That was taken away. And now I just feel like a disappointment. So now I retract and go inwards, and now I'm sitting with these emotions, which then wind up turning into anger. because now I'm angry at her and now I'm angry at myself.
Mm.
Now it's hard to regulate my entire emotional system. And now I'm having a hard time trusting. And again, this is my own feeling, so I
Mhm.
can't speak for every child. I have a hard time trusting my parental unit to do the right thing by me when I was trusting I was going to get what I worked for and deserved. And that creates a whole nother type of problems. And that wound up correlating to my ODD that I developed, where I was oppositional and angry and volatile because now I didn't trust my support system. And not only did I not trust my support system, I didn't trust myself making the right decisions.
Mm.
So that it's hard when you have a parent who in their mind is trying to do the right thing. Because I have an amazing mother. She's like the best mom in the world. And she loves me unconditionally, but she wasn't aware how to actually validate what I'm feeling in that moment. The getting down to the level, like sitting on the floor, like Stacy said, I do it with my kids all the time. When you're eye level with them and you're not towering over them, they don't feel that sense of superiority.
Mhm.
They feel like you're a child with them on the floor, and having that equal eye level
You're
with
on their
them,
level.
you're
Yeah.
on their
Super
level. So
important.
now you can play. So now it's a sense of playing rather than a sense of reprimandation. So that's the hard part for a lot of kids that wind up having these threats, and maybe they're empty, maybe they're fulfilled threats. Um, these kids wind up facing that frustration, and they deal with a lot of internal head chatter. So at the same time, like we were having the conversation before, while we're having a conversation, a person with ADHD is going to have their thoughts planned. We have our own chatter going on while you're reprimanding us, which we want to do better. We want to feel better. But as we're listening to what you're saying to us about how we are not being accepted in this moment or heard in this moment, that chatter turns into a real aggressive thought real quick, which then exasperates what we're feeling on the outside.
Right. And then there's consequences.
Always a consequence.
Right. And I think, I said before, I quoted it, my little air quotes, ADHD behavior.
It's not.
It's
I-
not behavior.
You say what it is.
Yeah, you go ahead. You do it.
It's a stress response.
Mhm.
Yep.
It's a stress response, and I think that correlates to everything that winds up happening. And again, personal opinion, with everything that winds up happening. I know that there is a common, I don't want to call it a misconception, but attention deficit disorder. What I've noticed in myself was I never had a hard time paying attention to anything. I can hyper fixate on things. When I am out of my element, my stress response kicks in. And my response of navigating my stress was to just tune out because I couldn't handle the anxiety that wound up, arising in the moment. So a lot of these behaviors, just in general, the acting out, screaming, the crying, the inability to regulate their emotions, it's not a behavior, it's a stress response that winds up taking place.
I want to speak to something that you said.
Yeah.
One of the things I try to explain to people, and it's not just parents, sometimes it's even adults. They'll say, I don't understand though. I know I have ADD, which is attention deficit disorder, but I can really pay attention for hours, sometimes almost to my own detriment. I'm too in tune and too hyperfixated
That
on something.
hyper-focus on.
I'm hyper focused. So doesn't that mean I don't have attention deficit disorder? And so what I say is the name is misleading.
Correct.
It's not an attention deficit disorder. I don't know why it's called that.
Neither do I.
It's not an attention deficit disorder. It's an attention regulation disorder.
Yes, it's perfect.
You can't actually regulate when you're going to pay attention. I remember watching a study, this was a gazillion years ago, that they did on a child. And this was like this is a perfect video for any individual or parent to watch that doesn't understand this concept. They had like a bird's eye view camera on this little boy who is watching on a screen a lecture about some subject that was really boring to them. And he's spinning around in his chair and slapping the table and like slinking down onto the ground like silly putty, like slime, like literally losing his mind. And then they ask him, what's your favorite movie? And he says Star Wars. And then they put Star Wars on, and you got the same bird's eye view of the kid watching Star Wars.
Yup. Yup.
And he doesn't move for 2 hours. Right. And so here's what's happening, right? I like to talk about the science part of it.
Oh, yeah, please.
So what's happening is ADHD is a dopamine issue. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in your brain. Now you're using your working memory to think about brains and neurotransmitters and dopamine so that you could place where this belongs and so
I'm
that
still
you
thinking
can
about Star Wars.
learn. I love Star Wars.
Do you? I never got into Star Wars.
We could talk about that another time. Why do I love Star Wars? I should have talked about that in our TV show episode. So anyway, a person with ADHD wakes up in the morning, picture like you have a little jar in your brain full of this chemical dopamine, and you need this much dopamine. You need this much dopamine in order to get through the day and do all the things that society expects you to do. But you only have this much, right? So now you need things that are going to release dopamine in your brain so that you feel regulated and you feel like you can function and do the things you need to do. And so people with ADHD have what I like to call dopamine seeking brains, right? They're looking for opportunities to release dopamine in their brain
And fill up that jar.
and fill up that jar so that they can pay attention and focus and function and feel that they have a mastery in something and feel good about themselves, right? Because self-esteem is a huge
Big.
piece, which we'll
Yes.
talk about next. And so you can hyper-focus on the things that you love. But if you're sitting in algebra class and you don't find any joy or interest in algebra, you're going to be that kid who's spinning around in the chair, climbing in your seat, making noises, slapping your pencil on the desk, and getting in trouble, right? Mom's getting a call home. That I got that call home all the
Brandon's
time.
asleep in class.
Same.
Brandon's sleeping through math class, and I would be like, "Yeah, that makes sense.
He hates math.
He can't do math," and so it's very stressful for him to sit through math class, and this is how he copes. They were telling me so that like when Brandon came home, I would
You
yell at
discipline him.
Yep.
Mhm.
"How dare you fall asleep in math class?" I mean, I was just like, poor kid. I didn't even bring it up.
Yeah.
What was there to say? There's nothing to say. This is hard for him. He's doing his best. And sleeping through class is how he is existing through a class that he shouldn't have to take in the first place. That's my perspective on it. But that being said, can we manipulate dopamine to be able to pay attention when we have to but don't want to? Yes. So I often get accommodations for kids in school where they'll have, like a little pad on their desk and they can actually doodle in short increments where they can take a break. They do the Pomodoro technique where they pay attention for a certain amount of time, then they doodle for a couple of minutes, then they pay attention again. And so some people might say, well, then while they're doodling, they're not paying attention. Yeah, but if you don't give them the little breaks to doodle, they're not paying attention at all.
Zero.
So at least they're taking in some of what's going on in class by giving themselves these breaks. They can't sit through a 45-minute class about something they're not interested in. If it's a topic they're interested in, they can pay attention like a rock star. But if it's a topic they're not interested in, it's going to be physically impossible
Yeah.
to pay attention. And yet they're constantly being scolded and told they're not doing a good enough job, right? I think that researchers have discovered that by the age of 12, the average child with ADHD has gotten 20,000 negative messages about themselves. And that's why rejection sensitivity dysmorphia, RSD, is one of the main symptoms of ADHD. This not feeling good about yourself and believing that everybody around you constantly thinks you're not good enough, that you internalize this,
Yep.
right? And you feel like you're not good enough. And that's, maybe something that you can even speak to personally.
Oh yeah. So I dealt with RSD, and I don't think I actually wound up being able to regulate that until my late 20s, probably until about 27.
Wow.
Yeah. And I struggled with that for a long time, and it's almost you pick up on people's micro expressions and you internalize them. So imagine if I told you I didn't like your shirt. To a normal person, you'd be like, all right, I don't care, your opinion. To somebody like me, it would be like taking a knife, stabbing it in my chest, taking it back out, putting it back in, and then turning it. That's what that would be. And you almost hyperfixate on the lack of response that you get from people sometimes. So for me, I would always feel like I was disappointing everybody. That was a huge thing because, like Stacy said, those 20,000 micro, um, what was the terminology you used again? The corrections, the micro corrections. When we're constantly told, don't do that, that's wrong, that's not right, quiet down, you're acting out, we internalize that and it becomes a trauma response in our ears. So for me, one day somebody would say hi to me, and the next day, maybe they didn't see me. I would feel that they were mad at me. What did I do to disappoint this person?
Mm.
And I would ruminate in that thought all day. And then as I'm vacillating in this, I can't pull myself out of it. So now that affects my entire day. So now I'm on this steady downhill slope for the remainder of the day. So no matter what happens next, now whatever minute trivial thing could potentially go on in my day that normally I might not pay attention to, I'm turning molehills into mountains over everything. And then I wind up becoming depressed and more depressed and more depressed. And that doesn't just go away the next
Because
day.
then you got feelings that you have a hard time regulating that feel more
Constantly,
intense.
constantly.
Yeah.
And these emotions are beyond intense. And the entire time, what I think a lot of parents who have children with ADHD don't understand is we already don't feel good about ourselves. So when we're put in a position where we're being corrected too much because of things that are out of our control, that feeling that Stacey said, that inability to regulate these emotions that are coming up for us, they impact us on such a greater scale. It's unfathomable for us to put into an actual understanding, to explain them to you in actual words. The only thing that I can get through to anybody who would be listening to this to know how it feels like you're being crushed by 1,000 pounds
Wow.
from your head to your toes, and you feel it kind of rush through your entire body. It's a physical feeling. So
Mhm.
it's not just a mental
Emotion.
emotion. You are physically dealing with this emotion. These emotional detriments are manifesting into your physical body. So now you're not just getting sick mentally, you feel sick physically,
Yeah. Mhm.
which I think is something that most people don't actually understand.
It's really hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard.
I watched my son suffer with that his whole life. He's 24 now, so he's really coming into his own and starting to really like himself, I think, for the first time in his life, I
So
think. And he's an executive function coach now
right.
as well. He's just like you, he understands the impact that this has on a person's relationship with themselves.
Yeah.
And you have this at this existential crisis of like, why can't I do what everyone else does? Why am I never good enough? Why is everything hard for me? And these are things he has said to me. And it's, as a parent, it's crushing.
Yeah.
It's so painful as a parent to observe this and not be able to do anything about it. Because even though I could try my best to do everything as right as I possibly can as a parent, which I didn't do because in the very beginning, I didn't understand. I wasn't an expert yet.
It's a learning process for everybody.
Yeah.
Really.
And I listened to the peanut gallery telling me things, and I thought maybe I'm an idiot and they know better. And so, I wish that I knew when he was diagnosed at 7 what I know today, but they don't give you an education about it when they diagnose your child. They just diagnose them and say, do you want medication or not, and send you on your way. I didn't know anything. And I tried my best and I made mistakes, but watching him as a parent and in the later years trying to literally do everything right doesn't take away from the pain that he's going to feel because society is what it is.
Correct. And we have this undying and incessant need to have a sense of belonging,
Yeah.
feel different.
Yeah.
We're in that constant state of comparison. That constant state of comparison always robbing us of our own joy and being proud of the person that we actually are. We lose touch and sight of our own nuances and the intricacies and the things that make us us because we just want to be like everybody else, to
Yeah.
be able to play with everybody else, to fit in with everybody else. And we need that sense of belonging. And in doing that, we lose our authenticity. And I speak to all of my clients about being your true authentic self, those weird, quirky intricacies that
Mhm.
only belong to you innately. Those are the
Mhm.
best parts of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where your son is now, where I'm definitely at now, and now you're saying that you're watching your son begin this journey of falling into this own sense of love with himself.
Hmm.
He's beginning to realize these innate qualities and character traits that he was born with, this birthright for him to be a fun, loving,
Hmm.
intelligent young man. And the sooner that we realize that, and sometimes it takes us kind of going through hell,
Mm.
so we have to go through hell to experience what a little bit of heaven actually feels like. No light without the dark. And I think for people, when we finally lose that attachment to wanting to belong and we just self-accept finally,
Hmm.
we fall into ourselves, we're capable of some of the most amazing things.
Yeah,
So he's just starting that. He's going to excel far beyond anything that he can possibly.
he will.
No, he will.
Because now he gets to focus on what he's good at,
Yeah.
what releases his dopamine,
Mhm.
what he's good at. And he said something to me a couple months ago, which, was so insightful and so true. Um, he said, I go to the gym, I play tennis, I taught myself how to play guitar. I'm doing this work with kids, executive function coaching. And he's like, for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm good at stuff. And my whole life, I mean, and I watched it painfully. He was constantly trying to find that one thing that he could be good at. And he was always barking up the wrong tree because he
Yep.
was trying to fit in with the popular kids
Yep.
and wanting to be accepted. And so he was constantly trying to be good at this and trying to be good at that and feeling like a failure. And he says, I think that the biggest problem in society and what really hurt me the most is being programmed to think that I had to be good at school. I had to be good at math. I had to be good at social studies and remembering facts about things that don't matter.
Correct.
Like I had to know how to make a mummy. When the fuck am I ever making a goddamn mummy in my life, right? Like, why did I have to take a test where I had to talk about like the brain get pulled out of the nose?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you remembered that. I guess that released dopamine.
It did. So there's so dopamine, going back into that, it's a weird chemical. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's replenishable, it's depletable, and most importantly, it's self-amplifying. So, like Stacy was saying, when we hear something or we're engaging in an activity, and I'm pretty sure that dopamine winds up converting to adrenaline as well.
Hmm.
So, those two combined, you have a hyper sense of focus, being alert, and attention. So, even like a random fact like that, it's so funny because as you said that, my brain exploded in patterns and colors and shapes. And I remember being in elementary school, hearing the weirdest facts that I haven't thought about in years. But that's the beauty of having ADHD. You have all these secret components to your brain that you really don't realize are there. And little things like that can elicit these memories of being in elementary school, learning how to dissect a frog. Why did I need to do that? Why do I remember exactly where the stomach is on the frog and how to remove it with the scalpel? There's no need for that.
I left the
There's no
classroom
need for
for
that,
Frog Day.
you know?
I had to go sit in the library. I couldn't handle it.
But it's so interesting. And I think we're capable of memorizing so many things that we're completely unaware of, that are just buried and compartmentalized and nestled in our brain. Incredible.
Yeah. But what he said really made me think just a lot about society as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason why, somebody like you or my son go through life constantly with this message of you're not good enough, you need to do better, is because society is deciding, they're kind of like, if you look at the school system here in America.
To prison.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So the way I kind of look at it is it's kind of like you look at it like there's this big pegboard, right? And and I might have said this to you before, there's a bunch of squares cut out of this pegboard and there's a bunch of square pegs, and you take the square peg and you put it in the little square hole. But then every once in a while you have a triangle, you have a circle, and they don't say, well, the triangle or the circle don't fit into this mold, right? We need to cut out a circle for the circle. We need to cut out a triangle for the triangle. Instead, they figure out, how do I butter up the circle or the triangle
Jam
enough
it in.
Yeah.
so that I can squeeze it into the square
Yep.
when there's no way it's going to fit. And that's what's happening to these kids in school. We give them all these accommodations, and that's fine. I'm somebody who, as an advocate, fights for these accommodations because it's the only way. But the reality is, it's not accommodations that they need because there isn't anything wrong with them. Their brain just functions differently.
Mhm.
And so we're not in society saying, everyone's brain is different. Brains are unique and we all have unique styles of learning. They say this is the right way. And if you can't do it this way, there's something wrong with you.
Correct.
And how do we help you to be able to do it this way? And that's why you've got this mental health crisis among neurodivergent kids and adults, because there's a constant message starts in school, and then it's fed to the parents, and the parents will enforce and reinforce what the school is telling them. You have to do better. We have to get you 1 million tutors.
Yep.
Right. So now the kid who's struggling in math because he's got dyscalculia and ADHD, who can't do math, now has a tutor that he has to see, and he has to go to extra help. So now he's spending more time doing the one thing he's the worst at.
That was me. Literally at math.
Right. And instead of spending time doing what they're good at.
Yep.
So now as an adult, you get to choose what you're doing.
Yes.
You get to do the things you're good at. My
Yes.
son gets to do the things he's good at instead of spending all this time doing the thing he sucks at and making him feel like a loser, which is only going to enhance the rejection sensitivity dysmorphia that he has, because there's a constant message of, I suck, I'm stupid, I'm not good enough.
So I have a weird question.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, if you were to create a society,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Uh-oh.
Have you thought about this?
Uh-oh.
Okay. So if you were to create a society
Mhm.
where school was not systematically programmed into us the way it is now,
Yeah.
and you have these kids with all these different abilities. Okay. So like mine was reading, writing, sports. And I could put things together as a kid without needing any type of instruction.
Needed you.
Oh, I'm still good at it. I'm still good at it. My mind works in like a weird puzzle type thing.
Mhm.
What could you envision and see something like that happening? How would you branch these kids off, or what would you wind up putting them into, or what type of structure would you have for these kids that are excelling in one thing, not so good in the other, excelling in this, not so good in that? What is your dream to put these kids into?
Okay.
Okay.
So here's my dream.
Yes.
My dream is, number one, we completely reimagine curriculum.
Okay.
I think number one, first and foremost, I think that there needs to be a class. Like we teach algebra, we teach math, we teach science, we teach social studies. There has to be a class called emotions that starts in kindergarten and goes through 12th grade. And every year it needs to be relevant to the age of development that child is in, number one. And number two, I think that there should be tracks.
Okay.
Right? Maybe this kid's on a science and math track. Maybe this kid is on more of an artistic track, right? Like, so you could have a kid who has ADHD who's an amazing artist or an amazing musician or an amazing dancer, but that's not important, right?
Right.
It's like, well, those are the specials. You have to be good at reading and social studies and arithmetic and all those things. And then you get to do that, right? That's a privilege.
Right.
That you get only when you earn it, And I have a lot of parents that will say, well, I'm going to tell my child she can't go to dance class anymore. He can't go to basketball anymore. Or we're going to stop guitar lessons because you're falling behind in school. But if we allow the child to major in, even starting in elementary school, the subjects that lure them in,
Yep.
let them have a major. Let them have, I really love this, because then even though we might have to teach them some other things because they need to know them for life and those things might be hard, at least they have the opportunity to have things that they really excel at so they could see these are my weaknesses, these are my strengths. I don't think that kids in society today here in America are given the opportunity to really see their strengths.
Right. I agree with that.
Right. It's like my son said, right? Like he's like, I had to go to tutors and I had to pass the algebra regents in order to graduate. And that was a struggle. He had to take it several times, right? And he had to retake math and he had to get tutors just to get a 68.
Yeah.
So he could pass the math regents and graduate because it's in New York. That's it. You have to pass the regents, right? Even if you can't. He's like, I don't use math. He's like, I got my cell phone in my pocket. If I need to add,
Calculator
multiply, or
all
subtract,
day.
there's calculators on me all the time. If I need to do that, I can do that. But for me, playing the guitar, doing the executive function coaching with the kids, playing tennis, going to the gym, going grocery shopping, these are the things I need in my life. I don't need algebra. Why was it so important for me to pass an algebra regents? This
Yeah.
makes no sense. And so I was made to feel like I was stupid my whole life because I was forced to do these things, but there was nothing. There was no class in school that he took that made him feel like a success
Okay.
or that was interesting to him. So I think that there should be different tracks. And I think that there should be a neurodivergent track that you can choose to go on that teaches things differently, that teaches things through a different lens. And I think that there should be a major, and I think that there should be a minor, and I think it should be a little bit more like college where you get to choose the things. And if you want to major in dance and you want dance to be your focus, or you want music to be your focus or art to be your focus, why are we minimizing the importance of those things when it's more likely that the kid is going to go down that track
Regardless.
professionally,
Yeah. Yep.
right? And not do math,
Right.
right? Or history or all these things that are not intriguing to them. Why are we telling them, if you're not good at this, you're not going to make it? And this is the message they're getting, right? Their teachers, their guidance counselors, their parents are saying things to them like, well, if you're not going to do well in school, how are you going to survive in the world? How are you going to get a job one day? I have parents of 13 and 14-year-olds saying things to me like, well, how long is this going to take to work, the coaching thing? How long is this
You're
going
gonna
to
fix them?
how long is this going to take? Because, I'm really worried about her. How is she going to get a job one day and function in the world if she can't even get up on time for school? And I'm like, she's 14. Her prefrontal lobe isn't fully developed because she has got ADHD.
Yep.
Probably not going to be fully developed until she's close to 30. In a neurotypical brain, it's not fully developed until you're 25. Why are you deciding how you think your daughter is going to function in the world based on how she functions at 14 years old?
Correct.
Plus, there's a 30% lag in cognitive ability, in brain growth and development, and in emotional development in someone who's neurodivergent. So your 20-year-old is 30% less than 20 years
Right,
old. So
right.
they're like a 14-year-old. They're functioning like a 14-year-old. Would you ask a 14-year-old to do what you would ask a 20-year-old to do? Right? So the 14-year-old is someone do math for me. What's 30% less than 14?
So half of that would be 7. So I'd say around maybe 9.
Okay.
10,
Okay.
right?
So would you ask
I'm
your
not.
9?
I'm not a math guy. I told you that.
And I was in honors math, but I haven't done math since high school because I'm a therapist. I'm a social worker, and I don't need to do math. I have a calculator in my pocket,
Right
like the
in the
rest
phone.
of society, right? So I don't need to know it either. We don't really need to know math,
Yeah.
right? So she's 9, and now you're talking to this 14-year-old girl and her coach, and you're saying, hey, when is she going to be able to do this or this or that? We need to step this up because I have anxiety as the parent.
Right.
I need to know that she's going to be able to function in the world. And I'll tell you something. If my 24-year-old son is functioning, anybody can function because he had a real hard time.
I get
It was scary.
Get it.
It was scary, but brain growth and development, finding his strengths, being patient.
So what about for the parents then? What can you offer the parents
Mm-hmm.
that are coming into a session who are internalizing their child's struggle for their own fears?
Yeah.
So you have somebody come in, how's my kid going to do this? How's he going to do that? Obviously, they're in fear and in lack of what they are just projecting onto their child. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you navigate a situation with the parents? What can you offer the parents who want the now, who want the fix immediately at this very
Yeah. So I think 3 things. Number 1, I think it's really important for anyone coming in with an issue with parents is they have to understand where their anxiety and fear is coming from. What has their own experience been in life that is bringing them to this place of fear, right? Everyone's journey with fear is personal. And so I think that they probably need to do a little bit of their own work to understand why this is scary for them and where their beliefs are coming from that is telling them that this is bad and they have to somehow fix it. Are they in some ways projecting their own feelings and insecurities about themselves onto their child and needing their child to perform a certain way for them to feel okay about their parent, themselves as a parent. Number two, all of this stuff we're talking about, educating yourselves, understanding what ADHD is, understanding that it's not overdiagnosed, it's not fake, it is real. There is science to it. There are right ways of doing things, and you can learn what those things are. Stop listening to the peanut gallery. Ask yourself, when this person is telling me what to do they really know what they're talking about? And don't just assume that because someone's a school psychologist, they know what they're talking about, because some really don't. Sometimes they do. They're not all bad. But a lot of the school officials really don't have the expertise and don't know what they're doing at all.
They're all textbook.
Yeah, or they didn't learn about ADHD
Correct.
and what to do. They learned about behavior and they learned about positive and negative reinforcement. And they don't understand that what's happening in school is not about behavior, right? So it's not always the right thing, and it's okay to advocate for your child. And if you're not sure how to advocate for your child, get an advocate and make sure that advocate really knows and understands ADHD and how the laws work federally and in the state in terms of education and what your child is entitled to. That's so important, right? And the third thing, which is probably the most important thing, is acceptance. Accept that your child has ADHD. Accept it. Sit with it. Sit with the difficulty of it. Feel what feelings you have about it, what feelings you have as a parent, what it's going to mean for your child growing up. Educate yourself and accept it because it's real. Not accepting it and trying to fix it does not make it go away. If you sit in acceptance of something, you now have the power and the tools to actually do something about it. You are better able to support your child if you accept what's going on with them instead of trying to change it. So I think, unless there's any last thoughts
No.
that either one of you want to add, I think I'll leave you guys with that. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Ian, where can we find you if we want to hear more from you?
I am employed by Right Path Counseling with Stacy, so you can contact me there. Or you can see me on my own podcast, Mindful Conversations, where we tie in spirituality and psychology.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yep. So, definitely reach out to Right Path Counseling or the ADHD Training Center, where we offer lots of education and coaching. If you want more, for parents or for individuals or even executives, we're there to help. So, I'm Stacy,
And I'm Heather.
and please feel free to join us in the future on next episodes of Why Do People Do That, where we explore the mysteries of all
Why do
different
people do
topics
that?
of why do people do that. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you are listening to us or watching us.
We're on YouTube.
YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you're watching us. Make sure you subscribe so that you can be notified when our next episode comes out about who knows what, all different things we like
Why
to
do
talk
people do
about.
that?
Why do people do that? Thanks, everyone.